Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Sustainable Sedition Radio. As always, I'm your host, Calvin Hutton. There's a quiet rebellion growing in the cracks of a crumbling society. It's not loud, it's not flashy, you won't see it in a news headline, but it's happening. It's happening every time that someone learns to feed themselves, patch their own roof, teach their own kids, or simply think for themselves in a culture that demands blind obedience. This week's dispatch is for anyone who's felt out of place, like they were born into the wrong timeline, watching the world go off the rails. But we're not here to shout and scream about it. We're here to build something stronger. And that starts by reclaiming what makes us resilient in the first place. So without further ado, let's get into it with this week's food for thought. Join the regenerative rebellion. We're living through the collapse of an empire right now, guys. Whether we want to admit it to ourselves or not, the United States is in fact an empire. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. First, let's get clear on what an empire actually is. An empire doesn't need to be a monarchy. It doesn't need emperors in gold robes or a Caesar or legionnaires marching through the streets. All it needs is a central power that survives by projecting force, extracting wealth, and controlling people, both abroad and at home. It doesn't grow by producing, it grows by feeding on the labor, the land, and the compliance of others. Think of an empire like a giant parasite that just got too big for its original host. So now it has to jump from country to country, resource to resource, and even person to person just to stay alive. It doesn't kill you. It drains you slowly until you're too weak to fight it off. That's what defines an empire. Not just expanding territory, but expanding influence. Not just taking land, but enforcing obedience through coercion, through dependence. And above all, it needs constant extraction to survive, of resources, of time, of energy, of will. That's the United States. We've got over 750 military bases in more than 80 countries. We've spent trillions waging wars, funding coups, launching drone strikes, and destabilizing entire regions. Not in defense of our freedom, but in pursuit of resources and leverage. The dollar isn't even money anymore. It's leverage. It's the empire's leash. And any country that tries to chew through it gets kicked in the teeth. Iraq tried, Libya tried, Venezuela tried. And just like a loan shark breaking knees on collection day, the empire sends bombs or sanctions instead of bills. We export our culture that looks like entertainment, but it functions like anesthesia. Fast food, social media, Hollywood, identity warfare disguised as progress, all engineered to pacify, distract, divide, and sell. And we do all this while hollowing out our own people. The empire doesn't just feed on foreign nations, it feeds on us. Through taxes, through inflating our money, through regulating every aspect of our lives, watching us through our screens, censoring our speech, and telling us it's all for our own good. The population is demoralized, addicted, and drowning in noise. This isn't a constitutional republic defending liberty. This is an empire defending hegemony, at home and abroad. And like every empire before it, it's starting to break down. History doesn't repeat itself, but damn if it doesn't rhyme. Rome debased its currency by cutting silver from its coins. We do it by printing trillions out of thin air, inflating away our savings, and destroying the value of our labor. Rome overextended itself by trying to police the known world. We've been doing the same thing for decades, and it's bleeding us dry. The political elite enrich themselves while public trust disintegrates. Left, right, doesn't matter. Nobody believes them anymore. They give us bread and circuses. Rome had colosseums and gladiators, and we've got TikTok, Netflix, and antidepressants. The population's distracted, medicated, and too exhausted to push back. Empires don't need to silence people if they can just keep them comfortably numb and scrolling. Rome gave them lions. We get dopamine hits and distractions. Same sedation, different circus. We're watching cities crumble, neighbors turn on each other, class warfare, racial tension, political violence. It's all ramping up while the people in charge keep looting the treasury. And perhaps most dangerously, nobody trusts the institutions anymore. Not the media, not the courts, not the military, not the elections. And when belief dies, collapse follows. Does that sound familiar? We're not approaching the fall, guys. We're living through it. I'm not saying that the U.S. is going to vanish overnight. I mean, look, Rome is still around, but it's not an empire anymore. And when every system that was built on faith, so currency, elections, media, starts eroding simultaneously, it's not prophecy, it has pattern recognition. The United States won't go out in a single dramatic moment. It'll unravel gradually through systemic failure, through quiet unrest, through loss of faith. The empire was never built to protect us. It was built to feed on us until there's nothing left. You were never its beneficiary. You were its battery. And once you're drained, they'll swap you out and plug in the next one. Once the extraction model fails, whether through economic collapse, global rejection of the dollar, or domestic uprising, the mask falls off for good. We're seeing that mask fall off in real time right now, guys. Last month it was Russia and Ukraine. Last week Trump and Musk had their billionaire butt-buddy breakup. And now it's the National Guard in the streets of LA. Every time that we turn on the news, scroll through social media, or hell, even walk down the street in what seems to be an increasing number of places, we're just bombarded with evidence that things are bad. And given the current trajectory, things are probably going to get a lot worse before anything starts to improve in a meaningful way. Every day we wake up and there's some new imminent threat parroted all over the headlines, whether that's the whispers of war with some foreign country we're at odds with, or the state of the economy and the dollar falling in on itself, while we continue to speed up that process by printing $541 million a day, and yes, that's an accurate figure, with nothing to back it, or the collapsing social dynamic between Americans that seems so irreversibly polarized that it seems like the left and the right are speaking two entirely different languages. On top of that, you can't get a straight answer about what's actually going on from politicians on either end of the political spectrum, because they are both so much more hell-bent on maintaining or grasping for power than they are in actually solving any of the actual problems at hand, or God forbid, telling you the truth about them. They're both just fighting for control of the steering wheel while the car's on fire. We've got a whole generation that's at the age where they should be just buying their first home, starting families, building a future. But most of us can't even afford rent without roommates, let alone a down payment. We were told to go to college, do it right, play the game, and a lot of us did. And we racked up a six-figure debt and can't find a job to pay for a useless degree, let alone groceries, gas, or a shot at owning land. And when we cave under the stress, these trusted experts call it a mental health crisis, and instead of asking why we're breaking, they sedate us, line us up, pump us full of pills, and call it care. But if the empire is the disease, then what good is the prescription? We're drugged until we're numb enough to drag ourselves through the misery, while the few bucks in our pocket lose value every day to the inflation of a fiat centralized currency. The tax system doesn't just take your money, it launders it through violence. It's like watching your paycheck get mugged, only the mugger uses it to buy bullets for someone else's war. And if you don't hand it over willingly, don't worry. They'll just garnish your wages and call it justice. You get a nice full paycheck, bam, a whole day's wages get sucked away before we can even touch it by a tax system that uses it to fund regime change overseas, to bomb the shit out of families and children in countries that most of us couldn't even find on a map, and to spark foreign conflicts that we didn't vote for. Also that the good old US of A can swoop in and play international policemen while quietly planting new leaders that are friendly to the expansion of our empire. Meanwhile, we watch it all unfold on the screens in our pockets, where we're fed nothing but identity politics and culture war propaganda to keep us distracted, divided, and disarmed. And then we're told it's freedom. Rah, rah, rah. USA! USA! It's no wonder everyone feels so fucking lost. So mentally checked out. No wonder we're so effed up. And don't get me wrong, I love my country. But I can't say the same thing about the state. And now we've got troops on the ground in LA. Not because a foreign enemy landed on our shores, but because the federal government kicked in the door of its own citizens, reached over state lines, and undermined the will of a community. They took a bat to a hornet's nest and are now calling the chaos a reason to apply more force. ICE raids, workplace arrests, families being torn apart by a sweeping, centralized, one-size-fits-all legislation. A protest that escalated into a riot where now innocent bystanders are getting beaten and flashbanged, properties are getting torched, and now the military's been deployed, not to protect the people, but to force everyone to get back in line. This isn't left versus right. It's the overreach of centralized power structures that have lost control of a situation that they helped create versus everyday people trying to survive in a system that was never designed for their freedom or their best interests in the first place. And the only perspectives that the media offers are through the narrow lens of left-wing ideology versus right-wing ideology. They're not designed to inform you, but to leverage this situation from both sides to further the agenda of the state, which is always to expand its own power. Here's what I mean. The principles of the left are, at their core, very noble and admirable. They're rooted in compassion, inclusivity, and driven by a genuine desire for justice. The left is often the first to see who's suffering, who's being left behind, who's the most vulnerable, and who gets hit the hardest by these busted-ass, outdated systems that we have in place. And they're right about a lot of what's broken. But the problem isn't the diagnosis, it's in the treatment. The solutions we see coming from the left almost always involve adding more policy, more regulation, and more centralized control in an attempt to engineer that fairness from the top down. They want to empower the state to fix the injustice. But there's a contradiction there. The same state that they're trying to use to solve the problem is the one that caused the problem in the first place. You can't empower a coercive system to deliver justice, because coercion is in and of itself unjust. It forces involuntary participation. You can't vote your way to equality through a machine built to extract, divide, and control. The solutions being offered just end up feeding the monster more authority and hope it behaves better this time, but it never does. The outcome is just a bigger monster, a more powerful state, and a population that's even more dependent on it. Now, the last thing that the right wants is more government. Most conservatives just want to be left the hell alone to work hard, raise their families, live their values, and chase the American dream. They don't want to be taxed into oblivion to fund a bloated nanny state. They don't want handouts. They don't want to be told how to live by some bureaucrat who's never spent a day in his life with a power tool in his hand. But they do want law and order, because they see it as the structure that protects everything that they love. And when things feel chaotic, when crime rises, when borders aren't secure, when cultural values seem under attack, the right tends to reach out for what they think will restore stability, even if it means giving the government more power to enforce it. And that's the trap, and that's the contradiction here. They want smaller government, but you can't shrink the state by growing its enforcement arm. And in the name of protecting their way of life, they often invite more enforcement, more surveillance, and more government muscle. And the state is happy to oblige. It's like, yeah, I got you, bro. Especially when the media plays its part with fear-mongering and highlighting the worst actions of a few bad actors, then using that fear to paint entire demographics as dangerous. And suddenly, law-abiding citizens and immigrants alike become suspects, People rally and call for the state to use draconian measures against the demonized group. Dissent becomes extremism, and that gets used as justification to give even more power to the state to squash the resistance. And bam, now you've got the situation in LA. So even when the right is right about what's worth protecting, family, faith, freedom, their solution still leads to the same dead end. They give more power to the very state they don't trust. It's the same boot on everyone's necks, it's just in a different uniform. And the outcome is again a bigger monster, a more powerful state, and a population even more entangled in the machinery of control they swore they were fighting against. Now, obviously, not every person on the left wants more state control, and not every conservative wants a police state. But these are the patterns that we've watched play out, time and time again, as each side reaches for its version of safety and justice, and ends up feeding the same bloated, parasitic empire. If you're in LA right now, and ICE is kicking down doors, and the National Guard is roaming the streets, and your neighbor, or your husband, or your uncle just got dragged away, that is terrible. I can't even imagine, and my heart goes out to you. If your business got looted, or your property was destroyed, none of this long-term strategy shit helps you guys in that moment of tragedy. And that's not what this is. I'm not here to preach decentralization like it's some magic fix from my comfy spot in the woods. I'm not claiming to have answers for the tragedies that are unfolding right now in real time. I'm just saying that this is the pattern. We've seen it again and again. And unless we build something different, it's going to keep repeating in city after city, in crisis after crisis. This is the fruit of empire. This is what central control does. It overreaches, it overreacts, it protects itself, not the people. And when we see it with clear eyes, when we stop pretending this system is salvageable, we can stop arguing about who's at the freaking wheel and start walking away from the wreckage entirely. Not everyone's ready for that, especially not in the middle of a war zone. But for those of us who are watching, those of us who haven't been swallowed up by it yet, we better start planting the seeds for something that can't be co-opted, corrupted, or called in by the National Guard. Because it's coming. And when it hits your neighborhood, the state's not going to save you. Your community might. Your soil might. Your self-reliance might. But only if you've built it before you need it. So, if the path on the left feeds the state with false hope, and the path on the right feeds it with reaction to fear, if trying to reform the system from the inside, using the tools it provides for you, doesn't work, what's the alternative? Have you ever tried to move a truck with a busted engine? You can get inside that thing, try to turn the engine over 1,000 times, crank that steering wheel all the way to the left and then all the way to the right, while stomping on the gas and shifting the gears all you want. But the engine's toast. That thing's not going anywhere. If you want to move it, you need to step outside that truck. You need to put your back against the bumper and start pushing. And sure, maybe you can inch it forward a few feet on your own, but not very far. That's when you call in a crew. Now you've got hands on the frame, a tow strap rigged up, boots in the dirt, and a shared direction. Now you can drag that thing, inch by inch, where it needs to go. Getting the system to change is the same damn thing. Inside of it, nothing works. It's bloated, tangled in red tape, and fortified by layers and layers of bureaucracy built specifically to absorb and redirect reform. There are just too many vested interests, too many careers, too many contracts and campaigns that are riding on things staying exactly the way they are. So all the energy you put into the system gets repackaged as another initiative, another program, and another lie that strengthens the very thing you were trying to fix. But you get out that system, now you've got leverage. You stop feeding it. You stop asking permission. You get some people together and you start building real solutions to problems. Locally, practically, visibly. And when you build what actually works, when it feeds people, when it heals land, when it solves real problems, people notice, and they want in. And suddenly the state has a choice. Adapt, jump on the bandwagon, or look really goddamn stupid. And nothing terrifies a politician more than looking useless to the people signing their paycheck. That's exactly what a guy named Brad Lancaster did. Back in the 90s, Tucson, Arizona was in the middle of a water crisis. To this day, is one of the hottest, driest cities in the country, getting barely 12 inches of rain in a year, which is not a lot. The city spent millions on imported water and landscaping ordinances while flushing millions of gallons of rainwater right down the storm drains. Every time it rained, Brad's street would flood, but all the water was being sent away as quickly as possible by design, and the trees were dying, food prices were rising, and people were just draining these ancient aquifers just to keep their yards alive. Brad saw how absolutely idiotic it was not to make use of that rainwater and decided he was going to do something about it. But he didn't go to the city to debate the rainwater policy. He picked up a shovel and got to work in his own neighborhood. He reshaped his property with swales and berms, harvesting rainwater off his roof, redirecting street runoff, and planting native food-producing trees that could thrive without a drop of city water. Mesquite trees for milling flour, prickly pear for fruit, chiltepin peppers, wolfberry, hackberry, and desert legumes. His yard became a rain-fed grocery store in the middle of the desert. But the real change started when he broke the law. Just like it's illegal in most places to modify city infrastructure, it was illegal in Tucson to cut street curbs. Even if that meant redirecting rain into soil instead of storm drains, even if it cooled the streets, grew food, and restored life. You were supposed to wait for the city. Brad didn't. He picked up a saw and illegally cut a hole in the curb. Rain poured in. Flooding decreased. The temperature dropped. The birds came back. The soil came alive. And food grew. And the neighbors noticed. One street at a time, people replicated his work, cutting curbs, planting edible rain-fed forests, transforming entire streets into food-producing ecosystems that didn't rely on a single drop of municipal water. Eventually, the city caught on and told him to stop, but he kept going, and it worked. The neighborhood went from cracked, barren concrete to a self-irrigating oasis that harvested over 1 million gallons of runoff annually, without pipes, without pumps, or taxpayer money. No permits, no government program, just a clear vision and dirt under their fingernails. And the city? Faced with neighborhood blocks blooming into self-sustaining, edible forests with no tax dollars spent, it had two options. Either crack down or catch up. And you can't justify sending law enforcement after a guy who's giving away mesquite flour to his neighbors from a tree watered by rain without making an absolute fool of yourself and looking like a goddamn cartoon villain. So Tucson changed the law and jumped on the bandwagon. And not only did they legalize the cutting of curbs, they started paying people to do it. $2,000 per household that did it. The same practice that was once criminalized became public policy. Why? Because Brad didn't fight the system. He outperformed it. Brad's rebellion didn't just make a point. It fed people. That's the lesson. You want real change? Don't go and beg the system that benefits from things staying the same. Don't go and rage against the machine. Channel that energy and build something better. Make that old system look so dumb by comparison that even the bureaucrats have to pretend that they were on your side the whole time. You know what else started off illegal, dismissed, and attacked by the state? Bitcoin. Satoshi Nakamoto is the anonymous creator of Bitcoin. Nobody's got any idea who this guy is. It could be one person, maybe a small group, no one knows. but whoever they are, they created a decentralized, voluntary, leaderless money system that now threatens the very foundations of every central bank on Earth. And they did it without asking permission, without revealing their identity, and then they just walked away. No patent, no profit, no headquarters, no glory. Just a white paper, some code, and a spark that turned into a global rebellion. And because they disappeared, no one can assassinate the idea by targeting the founder. That's a big part of the reason why it's still alive. That's why governments can't kill it, because it has no head to cut off. Satoshi didn't just protest the financial system, they out-engineered it. This is the single most effective, cleanest example of a decentralized solution forcing the world to change from the outside, and the ripple effects haven't even peaked yet. Satoshi created a decentralized, permissionless digital currency, a form of money that lives on the blockchain, a global network of computers that verify every transaction out in the open without needing a middleman. No banks, no borders, no backing from a central authority. It doesn't need approval, it doesn't need a printing press, and it sure as hell doesn't play by the rules of the establishment. Economists laughed at it. Governments called it fake money for internet nerds, criminals, and conspiracy nuts. Banks called it a dangerous scam. Bitcoin has no leader to arrest, no office to raid, and no switch to flip off. It was everything the system couldn't control. And so, of course, they mocked it. And then they demonized it. And then they panicked. Because people didn't listen. People still bought it. They held it. They built entire alternative economies around it. Not just to take a chance on the latest get-rich-quick scheme, but to get the hell out. Out of inflation, out of surveillance, out of a monetary system designed to bleed you dry while pretending to save you. Bitcoin didn't make any noise. It didn't play politics or lobby for approval. It just worked. Peer-to-peer, borderless, and immune to coercion. It let people transact directly, without banks, without middlemen, without censorship. And it couldn't be devalued by anyone holding the political office or pushing a button at the Fed. For the first time in modern history, people had a way to store value that couldn't be printed into worthlessness, seized by force, or frozen with a keystroke. And that's when the empire realized they couldn't kill it. So now, they're trying to buy it. Governments, hedge funds, central banks, the same institutions that swore it was dangerous are now scrambling to get their hands on some. Why? Because the dollar is rotting from the inside out. It's backed by nothing, and it's been printed into oblivion. Every new dollar, which they print by the trillions, steals from your savings, from your time, and from your labor. Inflation isn't a side effect, it's the business model. And Bitcoin broke out of it. Bitcoin's got a fixed supply. Nobody can make any more of it, and that scarcity gives it its value. And unlike fiat currency, where supply and corruption can hide behind a wall of confusing language, Bitcoin operates out in the open. Every transaction is logged on a public ledger. No backroom deals, no insider club, or central bank that's capable of pulling the strings. It's got a hard cap. 21 million. That's it. No matter who's in office. No matter how bad the next crisis is. The supply doesn't change. And the harder they fought it, the louder the signal became. This isn't just a digital asset. It's a declaration to the state. We don't trust your money anymore. And just like rainwater funneled into a desert garden, money flows towards systems that actually work, that produce value, solve real problems, and don't bleed people dry. Bitcoin became that system, a way to store value, transact freely, and build outside that broken financial system. So now, they're trying to regulate it. They're trying to package it, wrap it in ETFs, and call it safe. Trying to tame the thing that they couldn't kill. Trying to cage it. But you can't cage something that won't fit through the gate. And you can't stuff a decentralized movement into a filing cabinet. Bitcoin didn't come from Wall Street. It wasn't launched by a government. It was built by cypherpunks and rebels who understood what fiat money does to a free people. And now, it's an exit door. It's a life raft for people looking to get off the sinking Titanic that is our current economic system. And it's possibly the ultimate proof that when you stop asking permission and build something better, even the empire has to follow. I've got one more example of a decentralized solution for you guys today. And we're going to have to go back to the desert for this one. But this time, we're not going to Arizona. We're going to Jordan. A small, parched country in the Middle East that borders Palestine. It's one of the driest, most depleted, and eroded places on Earth. A landscape where rain barely falls, food doesn't grow, and hope had just about dried up too. Where Satoshi disrupted money, Jeff Lawton disrupted desertification, food systems, and the grip of centralized land control. Not with government grants, UN task forces, or billion-dollar NGOs, but with a shovel, a few swales, and some hardy trees. In the early 2000s, Jeff set out to green the desert using permaculture, a science rooted in ethics mimicking nature to regenerate soil, catch rain, and grow food. The land was bone dry, heavily salted, and written off as a lost cause by every conventional expert. Aid organizations had already poured millions of dollars into the region, offering short-term food drops and corporate agricultural schemes that just failed miserably year after year. Jeff didn't drop any food from the sky. He taught people how to grow it under their feet. But what he did there wasn't as simple as growing some trees in the sand. He used permaculture to expose how utterly useless these billion-dollar aid programs had become. No begging for government soil subsidies, he just built soil. No permits for irrigation, he changed the microclimate in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Within a few years, the same dead land was producing citrus, dates, figs, vegetables, and even nitrogen-fixing trees. The soil returned. The water cycle changed. Yeah, you heard that right. The water cycle changed. What Jeff set in motion there didn't just feed people. It helped to free them. They learned how to build their own future using tools that no one could take away. Meanwhile, the NGOs kept writing reports, burning through donor funds, and failing because they weren't trying to create resilient communities. Not because they were evil, but because an NGO is still a business. And business is good when people stay helpless. Independence, that puts them out of a job. And just like every other centralized system, well-meaning people get boxed in. They get stuck operating inside a model that manufactures dependence, because real resilience doesn't pay recurring grants. Jeff's design flipped that model on its head. No bureaucracy, no foreign overlords, just people working with nature itself instead of fighting it, and getting results that no spreadsheet ever could. He didn't save anyone. He showed them how to save themselves. And on top of that, what Jeff did in Jordan made the government-funded solutions look like a joke in comparison. And maybe the most impressive part about all of this is that the permaculture systems Jeff taught didn't rely on any outside inputs. No synthetic fertilizer, no fossil fuel irrigation, no genetically modified anything. Just human beings, ancient knowledge, and nature's feedback loops. That's what a decentralized solution looks like. It doesn't campaign for votes, it doesn't beg for funding, it just works, and it keeps working long after the headlines fade. It makes real, tangible, and lasting change in the lives and communities of people who are struggling to survive by handing them systems and tools that actually work, teaching them how to use them, and then stepping back to let them lead. The communities that Jeff worked with aren't reliant on food drops anymore. And to this day, they're actively spreading and teaching these skills to their children and to other communities in the area. Jeff helped lift people out of poverty, and he did it without stealing from one group through taxation to fund corrupt middlemen only to sprinkle the leftover crumbs down to the people that they were supposed to help. He taught people how to heal their land, feed their families, and reclaim their autonomy. And it's still working today. We could fill up volumes with stories of people who changed the world by stepping outside the system. I would even go so far as to say that every single leap forward that we have ever made throughout the entire course of human history has been made by people who broke the rules and stepped outside the box and did exactly what the experts or the church or the state forbid them from doing. And they changed the world. And alternatively, every single one of the worst atrocities in history came from people who were operating inside the system. The genocides, the gas chambers, the enslavement of entire peoples, the bombings, the death and destruction carried out by people who were just following orders, enforcing laws, quoting constitutions, and using the levers of state power to twist the world to fit their vision through force. From Hitler, Stalin, Mao, and Tojo to Mussolini and Julius Caesar. Was Galileo working within the system when he defied the church by studying the night sky through a telescope and discovered that the Earth was, in fact, not the center of the universe? Was Harriet Tubman following the rules when she helped smuggle enslaved men, women, and children through the Underground Railroad? How about Stanislav Petrov, a Soviet officer in the Cold War who refused to launch a retaliatory nuclear strike on the U.S. during a false alarm and single-handedly saved the world by disobeying direct orders? Was Solzhenitsyn playing politics when he exposed the gulags, smuggled the Gulag archipelago out of Russia, and struck a fatal blow to communism's moral facade with nothing but a book? Was Gandhi passing new laws? Was Snowden working within the chain of command? Was Assange waiting for approval? Malcolm X? What about MLK? The list goes on and on. If we want things to change, we have got to stop asking permission. We have to build, not destroy. The state holds the monopoly on destruction and violence. You try to meet it with force, and you're stepping into its arena, fighting it on its terms, in its terrain, and you're gonna lose. Lash out, and all you do is give them an excuse to crack down harder, and harder, and harder. The state has endless resources at its disposal. And the state doesn't bleed like we do. It might seem noble to run out there and face it head on with guns blazing, but to them, you're just cannon fodder. This isn't Star Wars. You don't hit an enemy where they're the strongest. You study, you wait, and you strike where it counts. If you want to be a real threat to the empire, taking the suffering of the world onto your own shoulders, feeling it all, and letting it be your fuel to learn, to build, to teach, and to replace it is the way. The power of the state comes from our complacency, our compliance, our consent, our dependency, and our trust. Become truly dangerous. Join the regenerative rebellion. Or call it whatever the hell you want. It doesn't have a name. It doesn't need one. We don't have a leader, or a unifying slogan, or matching t-shirts. This is a decentralized movement. It's bound by principles, not branding. It's a quiet revolution, made up of ordinary folks who've simply had enough, and are done waiting for change to come from the systems who benefit from things staying the same. We're the builders, the blue-collar workers, the mothers and fathers, the rural farmers, the urban punks, the people who still believe that a better world is possible and who have the guts to see it through and live it. A way of life that transcends borders, race, gender, religious beliefs, political ideology. People all over the world are already doing it, already laying the foundations so that you and me can add our pieces to the puzzle. This isn't a call to burn it all down, but it is a call to what I call sustainable sedition. Because in this broken, bloated, ass-backwards culture, the most subversive thing that we can possibly do is to build something that truly thrives, something that helps real people solve real problems and replaces what's broken with something that's built to last. Because history forgets the people who pointed fingers and waited for someone else to fix the world. And it recalls the cowards who enforced bad orders as a warning. But the ones who defied them, the ones who showed the rest of us a way out and a path forward, those are the ones who are truly remembered. Now that path forward isn't always this epic, cinematic spectacle. Sometimes it just starts with a humble tuber, sitting in a jar of water on your windowsill while you patiently wait for that first root to show. Sometimes it looks like growing the side dish you're going to eat with dinner. Sometimes it starts with grabbing a handful of a certain common root vegetable from the grocery store, setting a couple aside, and sprouting them as a first real step towards reclaiming some amount of food independence. And the perfect plant to do that with is our plant of the week, the sweet potato. Ipomia batatas. That's fun to say. At first glance, you'd never know just how much of a food-producing powerhouse this so-called potato really is. And the funny thing is, they're not actually related to potatoes at all. They're actually in the morning glory family, where regular potatoes are nightshades. But if you slice one in half and you stick it in a jar of water with the cut side facing down, in a few weeks you'll see little white roots starting to push out, followed by little green shoots climbing towards the light. Those shoots are called slips. And every single sweet potato can throw off 30 to 100 slips, depending on the size and the conditions and all that. Each of those slips can grow into its own plant that can produce 3 to 6 pounds of sweet potatoes in a season. The leaves are edible too. They're mild, they're tender, and perfect sautéed like spinach or tossed in a soup, stir fries, or salads, or whatever. They're high in nutrients and produce zero waste. If you gently snap the slips off their mother sweet potato, root them in a jar of water, and transplant them into the soil, congratulations. You just unlocked a damn near infinite supply of sweet potatoes for the rest of your life with nothing but a grocery store tuber and some minimal effort. They store for up to 6 to 12 months without refrigeration, as long as you cure them first by letting them sit warm and humid for about 10 days, which actually toughens the skin and makes them sweeter over time. After that, just stash them somewhere dark and cool. Nutrient-dense, storable, regenerative, and stupid easy to multiply. Sweet potatoes are quite possibly the perfect survival staple crop. Life isn't just about surviving, though. Sometimes, yeah, you've got to grit your teeth and push through the storm. But if you've got a vision on the other side of that storm, a reason to make it through, you fight harder. You hold the line. And you keep going when it gets ugly. For me these days, feeling that sense of purpose comes pretty easy. You know, I've got kids and a partner that I need to show up for. I've got sustainable sedition as a mission that keeps me grounded and dialed in on the things that matter the most to me. My family and my mission are my compass and my anchor. And when life throws its curveballs, which it always does, failure's not on the table. You know, there's too much riding on me getting it right. But it wasn't always like that. I remember being younger, looking out at the world and seeing what looks like just this insurmountable, overwhelming mess. And just sitting back and thinking to myself, like, man, this has just got to break. There's no way that things can go on like this. And, you know, that sent me into like a downward spiral for a long time. It wasn't until I really like sat with myself over time and got clear on the type of person that I wanted to be and what I wanted my life to mean, that I was able to start clawing my way back up. So if that's you right now, and you're drowning in the noise, you're pissed at the system, and you're unsure what the hell to do with your life, then this week's Tactic for Tough Times or Good Ones is just for you. This week, I want you to write out a mission statement for your life. And it's not some corporate resume bullshit. It's not something to impress people. This is just for you. Open up the Notes app on your phone, grab a pen and paper, go out in the woods or find somewhere quiet for a little bit and just sit with yourself. Get honest. Ask yourself these questions. Write down whatever comes up. And leave yourself lots of space to revise it if you want to come back and visit it later, which I advise you do. Question number 1. What do I not want my life to look like? It's an important question because once you get clear on what you don't want, it's easier to figure out what you do. What would the most ideal, meaningful version of my life look like? And keep this one practical, but go ahead and dare to dream a little bit. What would a day of your ideal life look like from the moment you woke up to the moment you went to bed? What do I need to cut out to make space for that? Do you have a problem with, spending every extra dime that you got on smokes and booze that prevents you from saving that money? Do you have any debt that you want to eliminate? Is there a problem that's been eating away at your marriage or your relationship and that would improve your situation if it got solved? Are you stuck in a job that you absolutely hate? You got to be brutally honest with yourself here and write it all down. Next question. What steps can I take to replace what I don't want with what I do? Look back at what needs to go, and now ask, how can I start cutting this out? Even just one step matters. Next, if I could change, teach, or impact just one thing in this world, what would it be? And again, be realistic here. Don't write down something like, I want to bring peace to planet Earth. Write something pragmatic. But also, strike the balance between pragmatism and reaching for something that maybe is a little bit outside of your grasp. Because true happiness doesn't come from achievement. It comes from meaningful pursuit. Next question. If I died tomorrow, what's one thing I would regret not building? This is probably the toughest question to answer, but it's your icing on the cake, and it's the one thing you were put here to do. Now, going through this might take you 5 minutes. It might take you all week. It might take you a month. You might come back and look at it again in 6 months and decide you want to rewrite the whole thing. That's fine. That's fine. If you really do this, and you really mean it, your life will start to shift. Because once you're clear on your reason why, you stop wasting your energy on distractions. You stop chasing other people's definitions of success, and you start building the life that matters to you. You're the only one who can do that. Life's hard. It changes constantly. So you've got 2 choices. You're either a drifting passenger living at the mercy of the changing tides, or you're the captain at the helm of your own ship, steering your life against the waves, storm or not, toward the life that you actually want to live. Now, we're going to do something a little bit unconventional for this week's practical skill highlight as well. And this week I've got another challenge for you. I want you to choose one thing that you've outsourced to someone else and learn how to do it yourself. It could be anything, It could be swapping out the brake pads on your truck or making your own herbal tincture. It could be learning basic first aid or CPR so your kid doesn't choke to death if they swallow a penny. It could be inoculating logs with mushroom spores, learning how to wire up a backup generator. It could be using a pressure canner with confidence or just making some beef jerky. I don't care what you pick. Just pick something that would be useful to you if you learned how to do it. And do it. We live during a time where there's a guy that we call for every single one of our basic needs. Your sink is leaking, you call the plumber. Your car's making a weird noise, you call the mechanic. You got a cough or a little sniffle, you call the doctor. We become so goddamn accustomed to outsourcing everything that we're on the verge of not knowing how to do anything. A generation or two ago, if you called somebody just to change your oil, patch your jeans, bake your bread, or treat your kid's fever, they'd look at you like you just shit your pants in a job interview. Nowadays, I see TikTok shorts and Instagram reels of people in their 30s proudly exclaiming, "I adulted today," because they did their effing laundry. I see that shit and I just have to put my phone down and go outside for a minute. And I don't know, go water the garden or something. We have normalized being helpless adult children. We've made it cute to be useless. And that helplessness makes us terrifyingly easy to control. The more disconnected you are from the basic skills that keep your life running smoothly, the more you have to depend on centralized systems to baby you and to fill your every need. And the more dependent you are, the easier it is for the state to dangle convenience in front of you like a Twinkie on a stick and get you to roll over, do flips, and shuffle wherever they want you to go. That's a pretty ugly image, isn't it? If you don't want that to be you, do yourself a favor and start picking up some skills. You can never get to a point where you're like, man, I just know how to do too many things. And you don't need to master everything all at once. Just don't be the guy that needs a government grant to change a goddamn light bulb. Start chipping away at the dependency, one small, meaningful act at a time. Pick one skill this week. Reclaim it. Teach it. Pass it on. Because a generation that knows how to do things can't be controlled the same way as one that's been taught to wait for help. One of the best skills that you can learn, that surprisingly, less and less people actually know how to do well, or at all, is to cook real food that doesn't involve a cardboard box or a microwave. I've got an easy and delicious recipe for you guys this week. Sweet potato and dandelion green hash with eggs. You're going to start by dicing up a couple of sweet potatoes. Ideally, the ones you started from slips on a windowsill, but, store-bought ones work fine. Toss them in a hot skillet with a little bacon grease or avocado oil, salt, pepper, maybe some paprika if you want to spice it up. Once they're browned and crisped on the outside, throw in a chopped onion and let that sweat down. Grab a handful of wild forage dandelion greens. And if you've got your sweet potato slips going, snap off a few of the biggest leaves and throw them in there too. Tear those up, toss your greens in right at the end so they wilt but they don't turn into mush. Fry up a couple of eggs, fried over easy, put them on the top. That's it. Breakfast from scratch with food that you grew or foraged yourself. If you're really serious about growing your own food, you got to take it back to the source. You got to start with the soil. And the best guide that I've found to help me find my way in the wide world of soil is our book of the month, Regenerative Soil by Matt Powers. If you want to understand what actually makes soil alive and how to build a life back from scratch in your soil, this is the one. Matt Powers isn't some tenured professor in a lab coat. He's a former high school teacher who got in hot water with his district for going against the grain and telling his students the truth. He used spreadsheets to prove that for most kids, going tens of thousands of dollars in debt for a college degree that pays barely above minimum wage just doesn't add up. Instead of backing down when the school came after him, he left the system. He went full citizen scientist and started building a new system. Now he's at the forefront of a global soil revolution. In Regenerative Soil, Powers breaks down the living system beneath our feet, the microbes, the minerals, the biology, and the feedback loops, and shows how you can actually rebuild fertility from nothing. Whether you've got a backyard plot, a front porch with some potted plants, or a 4x10 strip of dry-ass dirt in the alleyway of your apartment complex like I started with, this book gives you the tools and the understanding to turn dirt into life. A truly regenerative rebellion starts underground. Literally. All right, guys, that's a wrap on this week's dispatch. If you like the show, if you like what we're doing here, and you know someone who'd enjoy it too, please share this episode around and point them in our direction. The podcast is now live on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and I'm also working on getting us plugged in across many more platforms over the next week or so, and I'll have announcements as we get locked into each one. We're just coming out of the gate here, but even still, this thing is building momentum way faster than I thought it could. In the first 3 days after launch, Sustainable Sedition Radio broke into the top 250 philosophy podcasts in the US. I got the email from Apple, and I was just smiling like an idiot for the rest of the day. It's absurd, and it's humbling. There are tens of thousands of shows in that category, and this tiny little rebellion made a dent. And it's all thanks to you guys. Thank you. If you haven't subscribed yet, just search Sustainable Sedition Radio on your podcast app to follow the feed. While you're there, if you got a second, leave us a quick review. It helps us grow, and it helps more people like yourself find us in the noise. If you want more from us, check out the resources page at sustainablesedition.com/resources for books that shaped my thinking, documentaries worth watching, experts that I've learned from, and much, much more to come. Whether you're just here for the ideas or you're elbow deep in the dirt already, I appreciate the hell out of you for being here with us. Your attention is rare, your support is real, and the future is yours to reclaim. See you next Monday for dispatch number 6, and until then, keep regenerating, keep rebelling, keep showing up, and keep on building what thrives in changing times.